At Fide.email, we believe in protecting your privacy and supporting your faith. Fide.email offers peace of mind with features like end-to-end encryption and secure communications tools. Your data stays private and your values remain intact. Choose an email provider that understands what matters to you. Make the switch to Fide.email today.
Many of you called it. Many of your commentators called it too. If Francis could barely speak, if he could barely move, then how was he making decisions in the church? How was he governing? Turns out everything was fake. Almost everything. He's still alive. And we now know probably why he decided to rush out of the hospital when he did. Francis went to the hospital on the 14th of February and left on the 23rd of March. In that time, Francis had a number of health scares. And he was remarkably silent, save for some written messages to the world. And he was, quite frankly, very active in making rulings for the church. And even fairly moderate commentary media was raising their eyebrows at just how active he was. He was especially active in the appointment for bishops for dioceses. And the appointment of bishops is, as you might expect, canonically regulated, meaning the appointment of bishops falls under the laws of the church and how they are made valid and binding. And it all turned out to be fake. Maybe that's why he's taking such a high risk in getting back to Rome, what looks like prematurely, to reassert himself as the one governing the church, despite his condition that I showed you and virtually every other media outlet, secular and Catholic, showed you in the last couple of days. He clearly is not in good health at all, and yet he's rushing back to Rome, and now you have a good idea why. See, the story broke yesterday, and it deserves our attention, so we're just going to go over the whole thing here from Pillar Catholic with this incredible headline. It's all legal. How the Nuncio installed Detroit's Archbishop by his own decree. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, by his own decree. Going into the story, he was announced, the new Archbishop of Detroit was announced by Francis before he went into the hospital. But that didn't stop the Nuncio from just making up the paperwork to do it himself. And that begs a lot of questions, because the Archbishop could have been installed as the Archbishop-elect, essentially, or Archbishop designate, until Francis or another Pope was able to confirm him. That's not what they chose to do. This will cause people problems. And by rights, it should. Let me know if there's any weird signal problem, by the way, in this, because for some reason, the internet's a little wonky today, probably weather. So we're entering fun weather season here in central Oklahoma. Let's start going over this for the details. Quote, when Archbishop Edward Weisenberger was formally installed as Archbishop of Detroit last week, the liturgy included an interesting hiccup. There was no papal bull in the building to actually make Weisenberger the Archbishop. While Pope Francis' selection of Weisenberger as Archbishop was announced by the Vatican in February, the Pope soon after became dangerously unwell and was forced to spend more than a month in a Roman hospital for treatment. As a result, the formal papal bull of appointment, ordinarily required for a bishop to take possession of his new diocese, could not be signed by Francis. Still, the Mass went on. Indeed, during the March 18th Mass of installation at Detroit's Blessed Sacrament Cathedral, Apostolic Nuncio Cardinal Christophe Pierre told the gathered Catholics of the Archdiocese that he, the Nuncio, had prepared a decree of his own to effect Weisenberger's installation. Well, the Nuncio jokingly suggested that some canon lawyers might be, quote, worried, you think, by the unusual maneuver. The Cardinal actually exercised a little-known power granted to his office, shedding light on one of the many ways in the Church has worked to accommodate the Pope's prolonged illness. When he took to the ambo during Weisenberger's installation March 18th, Cardinal Pierre explained to the congregation that a highlight of a bishop's installation of a bishop, and indeed an otherwise constituted part of the process, is for the newly arrived bishop to display his papal bull of appointment to the clergy and Catholics of his diocese, most especially the Diocesan College of Consultors, a body of priests required by canon law to formally inspect the text during the liturgy. But Pierre explained that he couldn't be done at Weisenberger's installation Mass. I'm sorry, the Cardinal said from the lectern, because normally I should have shown you the bulla, the final document which is normally signed by the Holy Father. Unfortunately, because of his sickness, the Holy Father was unable to sign it. Let's pause here. He couldn't sign a papal bull confirming the installation of the new bishop of the Archdiocese of Detroit. He couldn't sign it. We have a lot of stories in the last month of him signing documents. And I'm not going to go over all of them. I'm really only going to go over one of them as an example, because it's probably the most important one. But he was too sick to sign his name to a papal bull, a form document that the Vatican probably has with a bunch of fill-in-the-blank lines on it. Name of the diocese, the name of the bishop, etc. And he couldn't sign that. I cannot read you a document which has not been signed by the Pope, the nuncio explained. Don't worry, he will be a real archbishop, Pierre hastened to add, to laughter from the assembly. Some of you are already smiling, he said, while explaining that he had himself drawn up a decree for the occasion in his capacity as apostolic nuncio. Don't worry, it is all legal, he assured the assembly. I can see that some canon lawyers are already worried. I don't know why. The papal bull of appointment, duly signed by the Pope, would arrive later, Pierre said, promising to put it in a museum so people would be able to inspect it. Instead, the nuncio read from a decree he had himself drawn up. Now, again, he is validly the bishop of that archdiocese. Francis appointed it to him before he went to the hospital. But he let the game slip. Francis couldn't sign the document. And he has signed a lot of documents. See, an example, I'll just give you one here of the things he did while incapable of making decisions is the establishment of a body for the Vatican Bank meant to address the Vatican's revenue issues, which have plagued the church for years. Take a look at this. This is headline from Church Times on the 7th of March, 2025. 6-member body to provide necessary means to support the Roman Catholic Church. This is the Vatican Bank reform. The Vatican has been hemorrhaging money for years. Partially because after the McCarrick crisis, laity didn't want to give money to the church anymore. And this is compounded by the fact that going back to the wicked evil priest problem that were basically part of the part of the McCarrick problem everybody knew about, people didn't want to give money to their churches anymore. They would give money to, the parish ministries, maybe to the parish building project, give a check directly to the priest in his name saying this is for the parish's needs for specifically this. They'd find ways, but they wouldn't give money to the parish explicitly because money to the parish goes to the diocese. Money to the diocese goes to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and it goes to the Vatican. At least small portions of it do. And so Catholics didn't want to do it anymore. And this is going to get worse in light of the USAID and Catholic Charities problem. But note this. This is done by Francis. Quotes, okay? Done by Francis. When he was at his worst, March 7th was right around the time you started having people reporting that Francis had 72 hours left. It's from the article. Pope Francis has set up a special commission to boost the Vatican's income amid fears that its worldwide outreach could face cutbacks because of dwindling resources. In a decree, the Pope said the new 6-member body would serve the Holy See's bond of unity and charity with local churches and provide necessary means for it to maintain its service to the universal church. Its work, he said, will reflect the current economic situation by organizing money-raising campaigns among the faithful, Episcopal conferences, and other potential benefactors, as well as by raising funds from willing donors for specific projects. The announcement follows mounting concern about the financial viability of the Vatican's diplomatic missions operating in 180 countries and 40 international organizations, as well as its media output in dozens of languages. Let's pause here. If you're wanting to know who you think, who probably is responsible for a lot of the things, quote, signed by Francis, you might get a hint here. This is a document worried about the financial viability of the Vatican's diplomatic missions. And do you know which cardinal is in charge of the diplomatic missions of the Vatican? The name most commonly cited as the most probable Francis II, should a conclave come soon, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who has been campaigning behind the scenes to be Pope, if all the reports out of Rome are credible, and I tend to think they are, while also being the one front and center saying that Francis will not resign and that the papacy is a lifetime appointment. Wanting to know who might be signing documents for Francis, this might very well be the man. Might. Reuters news agency said that the key Vatican earnings currently came from stock investments and rent from more than 500 properties, as well as from tourist revenue, university and hospital fees, and direct donations to papal funds. It said, however, that the annual income projections set at 840 million euros had fallen as a result of the affliction of 2020, administration and pension costs, and negative publicity from financial and McCarrick-type scandals, leaving an operating deficit calculated by the Italian daily La Repubblica last July of 83 million euros. It's about a 10% problem. And in response, it goes on to say about the things Francis has done to try to address this. But now they're establishing a new body to come up with new revenue. Fine, worth reporting on maybe. But the key is that Francis did this. He signed this document at the time when he was at his absolute worst in the hospital. At that time where it was pretty touch and go. And we just learned that the Papal Nuncio said that Francis couldn't even sign a decree of appointment for a bishop like a week ago. And we're expected to believe that he established a commission for finance. And this is just one of many things that he did. He did a lot of things. And I'm not talking about pre-prepared statements. Nobody thinks that Francis writes most of his own homilies or Angelus addresses. Somebody probably does that all for him. So who is making these decisions for him? Now, these decisions are probably being done in his name by ambitious cardinals, Parolin being one of them. Pay close attention to what happens to cardinals in Rome in the coming weeks now that Francis is back in the Vatican. Specifically, in this case, not to Parolin so much, but another name that you are very, very familiar with. Every person who is wondering what's going on here is familiar with, and that'd be Cardinal Fernandez. Headline from Gloria TV. This is the magic circle controlling access to Pope Francis. Cardinal Fernandez is going to be one of the very few people who will see Francis on a regular basis. Now, Fernandez's name never comes up as Papabile. Never. There is no word that he's campaigning to be Pope. There's no word that anybody's rallying around him to try to get his peers to make him Pope in the event that Francis goes to our Lord and we have a conclave. And Fernandez is the one controlling access. He's also another viable person for having done the auto pen deal with Francis, doing things in his name, even if Francis may not like them that much, because he and Francis are close confidants. He is one of Francis's closest confidants in the entire system. Here are the details. Francis will be accompanied by 2 male nurses and a doctor in the Vatican, reports Il Messaggero yesterday. Francis's physician is Dr. Luigi Carbone, deputy director of the Vatican City State Health and Hygiene Directorate. The nurse, Massimiliano Strapetti, who has followed him like a shadow since his first colon operation in 2021, will be in charge of Francis's care. Strapetti's right-hand man is Andrea Rinaldi, who has somewhat replaced the presence of butler Sandro Moriarty. At the Gemelli Hospital, Francis was able to see very few people. Similarly, his protected convalescence in the Vatican involves, at least in the beginning, little contact. The special role of secretaries filled primarily by Don Juan Cruz Villalon, and we'll talk about him in a moment. The other special secretary is Argentine priest Daniel Pelizon, who joined Francis' staff in 2023. These are the people who are controlling access to him, including the Cardinal's Secretary of State, Pietro Parolin, and his assistant, an archbishop, who, by the way, were the 2 cardinals the cardinal and the bishop who saw him every week. He will not be able to meet with the heads of the dicasteries, with the exception of his friend and redacted Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez. In other words, Francis is too busy to even have a face-to-face meeting, or too ill to have a face-to-face meeting with the bishops who run the dicasteries, who run the Vatican for him. He was too sick to to sign his name to a decree of appointment for the Archbishop of Detroit. And yet he's establishing financial bodies and overseeing some rather important operations in the Vatican. It's all fake, ladies and gentlemen. It's all fake. And Francis, by the way, again, I've said this repeatedly, his most endearing trait for those of us who would like to see the rest of that part of Francis take control of, like him, and come to the front, is the part that does not like ambition among the men in the College of Cardinals. He detests it. And that is 100% a good thing. I just wish that part of him would also have the same feelings about heterodoxy, and shielding wicked men who should not be in the priesthood to begin with, and all these other things. But unfortunately, It seems relegated to ambition. He doesn't like ambition. And let's see what happens if he has the ability to do anything. But there is something that also afoot here. And what he does next will tell you a lot. Here's a figure that's worth pointing out. He's an Argentinian priest named Father Juan Cruz Villalon, who is Francis's most recent personal secretary and has visited him frequently in Rome during his hospital stay. This priest is apparently Francis's eyes and ears during his hospital stay and now during his convalescence. And we can go to Mesa and Latino for this story. Again, it's a translation. Apologies for any syntax issues. Pope Francis, who is this priest, Bergoglio's secretary and crutch. He's being described as his crutch. This is the man, a young priest from Argentina, who is helping Francis keep his eyes and ears on things. For those of us who were paying close attention to Francis's stay in the hospital, it seemed that he went back to Casa Santa Marta prematurely. They went literally in one day. This is why I don't think Fernandez is in the loop on everything. Fernandez, the day it was announced that Francis was coming back to the hospital, before it was announced, Fernandez was saying, we don't know when he's coming back. He wasn't in the loop on this. Here's for the article. Quote, despite the tenacious turnover desired by Francis in recent years to avoid a concentration of power in the hands of his special secretaries, in the end there was one collaborator who managed to emerge more than the others, who, according to well-informed sources, played a leading role during Pope's hospital stay. This is Juan Cruz Villalon, who joined the special secretariat in 2023. Bergoglio, who ordained him a priest in 2011 in Buenos Aires, demonstrated his predilection on one of the most important occasions of his pontificate, last December 24th. In fact, it was Don Juan Cruz who accompanied him as he crossed the holy door of St. Peter's Basilica in a wheelchair. Francis also wanted him at the strategic dicastery for the clergy, but in recent days, the Argentine priest's attention has been focused solely on the apartment on the 10th floor of the Gemelli. Don Juan Cruz is indicated by several Vatican sources as one of the few who has always remained informed of the Pope's actual health conditions, in addition to having been able to have his say on the management of the news. Do you see how important this man is? This is his eyes and ears in Rome. So while all this manipulation is going on, this is the priest who is running things, or at least informing Francis of what's going on. And if you're wondering why Francis rushed back to Casa Santa Marta as quickly as he could, to the point where a week and a half before, it was reported that he was building a hospital room in Casa Santa Marta. This is the priest who helped make that happen. Those who frequent the sacred palaces have little doubt that now the Pope will return to Santa Marta. This was before, but the weight of the last Argentine secretary is designed to grow along with trust that the sick pontiff has in him. A situation similar to that of Stanislaus Zwitz. Apologies for the Polish watching this. I can't pronounce your language. Right-hand man of John Paul II, who during and after his last hospitalization at Gemelli in 2005 increasingly played a filter role with the outside world. The figure of Juan Cruz changed the mind of the Argentine Pope, who, unlike his predecessors, had made numerous changes and eliminated any hierarchy within his secretariat. Bergoglio had been categorical about the fact that his collaborator should only take care of him part-time and not exclusively. This is a man after Francis's own heart, modeled everything he does in his capacity after the way Francis runs the church in a synodal manner. And he is the eyes and ears of Francis, while people are doing things in Francis's name. Pay attention to what happens in the coming days. Don't be shocked if you start seeing some weird maneuvering of people around. I don't think you're going to see like Fernandez canned or anything, because Fernandez has no ambition. But things might be about to get interesting here. I want to talk briefly about what I was going to talk to you about this morning before this story broke yesterday. The real fruits of Francis's pontificate are obvious for anyone to see. We have a collapse of vocations. We have a collapse in Catholic morality. Benedict XVI had been trying to reassert things, and to the point where there were vocations were starting to increase a little bit during his time. Catholic morality, say whatever else you want about Benedict XVI. A lot of people have issue with Joseph Ratzinger's theology, but at the end of the day, he did say rather unpopular things about Catholic morality. He defended it, and that caused the church a lot of problems. People said some nasty things about Ratzinger during his time. But the real fruits of Francis's pontificate has been a collapse in both of these things. We have data now, or information now, that really points to just how bad this is. So let's start here with this piece from The Catholic Thing, with this headline. 12-year decline in worldwide priestly vocations accelerates. We keep being told that there is a new springtime in the church. We keep being told that we are seeing the fruits of Vatican II, that Francis is fully implementing it, and now we live in the springtime of the new evangelization. You may have heard that phrase coming from EWTN sometimes. We keep being told all these things, and yet it's a demographic winter in the church, and specifically in terms of vocations, in terms of use of the sacraments in the Western world. And when you really look down on the other side of things, in Catholic morality, everywhere in the world, including Africa, Catholic morality is under attack by the faithful themselves on some issue or another, depending where you are in the world. People have this belief that the church in Africa will save the church. Well, if they're going to do that, they have to reject their belief that a married man can have multiple partners, for example. They have to reject that. And the bishops of Africa, the same ones who said no to fiducia supplicans in James Martin's program, have asked Rome to come up with a solution to change teachings of the church on this stuff for Africa, at least. So you don't look to Africa for orthodoxy. But vocations, many of our vocations in the West come from Africa. I'm from Portland, Oregon originally. If there was a visiting priest in a parish, there was you tossed a coin, you flipped a coin. Is it going to be an African priest or a retired religious? And it turned out to be an African priest most of the time, at least in my parishes. But here are the details of this. This is not great news. Quote, the number of major seminarians worldwide fell from 108,481 in 2022 to 106,495 in 2023, according to statistics published in the new Annuarium Statisticum Ecclesiae, a decline of 1.83% in a single year. The decline in 2023 follows declines of 1.3% in 2022 and 1.7% in 2021. The number of major seminarians worldwide surged from 63,882 in 1978, the year of Pope John Paul II's election, to 110,553 in 2000, far surpassing the rate of worldwide population growth, and rose more steadily over the next decade to a peak of 120,616 in 2011. The decline has been especially pronounced since 2019. The number of seminarians stood at 114,000 at the end of 2019. Thus, the number of major seminarians worldwide has fallen 11.7% over a dozen-year period and 6.6% between the end of 2019 and the end of 2023. The 2023 decline in seminarians was most pronounced in Asia and in Europe. In Africa, however, the number of seminarians rose by 383 in 2023. End quote. This should not surprise anybody. In fact, it really shouldn't surprise anybody that this seems to have taken off after 2020 when church authorities took our sacraments away and told us that we were not essential, that you going to confession and receiving the Eucharist and going to Mass on Sunday was not essential. What kind of effect did they think this was going to have? You notice fewer people now, here we are 2 years since virtually every parish reopened. 2 years later, there are still people who don't go to Mass, who never came back. I remember reporting to you some time ago that somebody used geo-tracking, geo-fencing, what they call data, which is looking at cell phones. How many cell phones are at the Mass or at a place? And you can deduce how many people are going to Mass. It doesn't have to be in the parish building. They would definitely be including parking lots in this if you left your phone in the parking lot. And then it noticed that when they did this, that it was only like 8% of people go to Mass every Sunday in the United States, 8% of Catholics. That's staggering. What did they think was going to happen? Vocations are on a serious decline in the country and in the entire church. This is the fruit of all this upheaval in the church. One of the things that attracts people, you might not know this, but one of the things that attracts people to Catholicism isn't merely the historic claims and the sacraments and all the rest. It's the stability. People crave stability. Faith in Christ gives you stability. Anybody who's a convert knows this. Most every convert knows that their life was absolute chaos, morally or doctrinally or whatever, before they became a Catholic. And what happens when you start messing around with stability in the church? You cause people to leave or not come in the first place. The number of people I've encountered who were Protestants considering Catholicism, but then saw the changes going on, who then lost interest, is not a small number. I encounter these people personally. They drive people away. They drive the actual access to the sacraments down, and they drive away young men from the priesthood by trying to be worldly, because that is, at the end of the day, the main thrust of these changes. And we see this in this next piece of information. And this came from LifeSite. Headline: Majority of U.S. Catholics now support James Martin's parody of holy matrimony and the sacrifice to Moloch, Pew Research finds. This should also surprise absolutely nobody. This was published last Thursday. Pew found that 70% of Catholics now say they back the parody of holy matrimony, and 59% favor not James Martin, but favor the sacrifice to Moloch in most cases, exposing a collapse in Catholic moral formation and belief. And if you support either of those things, you are frankly a heretic. You are. You would have. That's what you would have been called and treated as in past times. You would have been barred from the sacraments until you admitted your error and submitted to the teaching of the church, and then you'd be allowed to go to confession. That is where we are. This is happening at a time when the U.S. bishops suddenly have backed off informally of this issue being what they would call the preeminent issue in America for the church. Now it's migration, led by Cardinal McElroy and Cardinal Supich, who have never been corrected on this, even by their brother bishops, to give you an idea of how much power and influence they have in Rome. This should concern everybody. If you ever felt like you were a lonely person because you held to the same things our Catholic ancestors believed in, how Catholics should, the things we should support in the secular world, this will give you an insight as to why this is happening. It's from the article, quote, "The U.S. Catholic Church stands at a crossroads marked by an aging flock, a growing immigrant presence, and a devastating erosion of faith and morals. The Pew Religious Landscape Study for Catholics from 2007 to 2007, 2014, and 2023-2024 offers a sobering glimpse into this crisis for traditional Catholics rooted in the magisterium's truths. For every 100 Catholics entering, 800 Catholics leave. For every 100 Catholics who enter the church, 800 leave. Prayer is declining, belief in God is plummeting, and a supermajority supports issues deemed morally evil by the church. Demographically propped up by immigrants, yet spiritually adrift. While the sharp declines from 2007 to 14 slowed by 2023-2024, the downward trend persists, demanding urgent reflection. The demographic profile of Catholics shows both continuity and change. The age distribution tilts older, with 18 to 29 age group dropping from 17% in 2014 to 14% in 2023, while those 65 and older rose from 20% to 28%. This aging trend signals a failure to retain youth who are bombarded by a culture hostile to faith." And there's a graph right there for those watching this on a video platform of the age breakdown. Orange here, the orange bar is current numbers. It seems that that those over 65 or those 50 and older are the largest group demographically in the church now. That should concern people. It is supported by significant funding collected by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops for migrants during the Biden administration. U.S. churches catering to them, with 29% now foreign-born, a shift that challenges its ability to maintain orthodoxy amid secular pressures. This group, largely driven by Hispanic communities, has shifted the racial makeup, with whites now just 54% and other races at 45%. And it goes into the amount of money collected by the U.S. bishops since then, because that issue is central to everything in the church right now. The church institutionally has become too cozy with Caesar. We stopped rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's and started helping Caesar enforce what is Caesar's at the expense of the law of the church, using the law of the church to justify it. The migration issue is a perfect example of this. The church has said, since Aquinas at least, that those who arrive in a new land have to follow the laws of the new land, and that Caesar, the king, whatever, in any country, has the full right to make the rules on who can and cannot even enter the country, who can be part of their community. That love of your country is part of your filial duty as a person, as a Catholic. That doesn't mean confirming your country and its rulers and their errors, but it does mean that you should love the land you live in and your neighbors. And the bishops have helped undermine all of that. And they did it for money, the most cynical of all things. They didn't do this because they thought it would bring some peace to the church in a country hostile to it. You could at least understand that motivation. You could sympathize with it. But they did it for money. Why? Because they let men morally unfit into the priesthood from the 60s onward, who did horrible, unspeakable things. Men like McCarrick. And they blew up in their faces starting in the late 80s and really in the 2000s. And the lawsuits that happened afterwards left a deep financial hole. So Caesar offered them money to bail them out of their own created mess, or the mess created by their like-minded forebears, and here we are. That's what they did to the church. Hopefully, God willing, we will have a turnaround soon. I'm curious what you think about this in the comments, please. As Grandma Ross, as Philip says, are these Catholics who are actually mass going or only baptized as a baby? These are Catholics who would attend mass, at least sometimes. These researchers, by the way, when they say regular mass goers, they don't mean every Sunday. They mean typically like once or twice a month. That's usually the common thread you see, regardless of who's doing the survey. And yeah, as another person said in the chat, for every one Catholic we gain, we lose 8. Yes. And that doesn't, I don't think that number, that losing 8, counts the number who just go to our Lord either, right? Who pass away from that, who pass away over the course of time. If you want to really down home, hit you really close to home kind of way, you're going to see now, we're approaching Easter. We are about halfway through Lent. Now we're approaching it. You will see in your parish signs up for praying for those in your, I guess now they call it OCIA program, and have their names. Some in the parish that I used to help on the RCIA team with years and years ago, there would be prayer cards that would be made for each person. Somebody would maybe have a photograph on one side and then a little bit about the person and asking that you pray for them. You did some mechanism like that in halfway decent parish, right? Count those names and then file that away. And then starting around August or September, you're going to start seeing things posted in most parishes about the people who passed away over the course of the year and their names. And that list always dwarfs those entering in, except at the most vibrant and healthy parishes. And usually the most vibrant and healthy ordinary form parishes are the ones with a 24-hour Eucharistic adoration option of some kind available, meaning benediction, as well as the reverent masses, communion on the tongue, communion in the hand, very rarely, maybe, and it looking more like a traditional preconciliar mass than the ordinary form mass. Those are usually the healthiest ones. That's what the research consistently indicates on these things. The more reverent and conservative the parish, the more healthy it is. But compare those two numbers, those coming in and those who you're asked to pray for the repose of the souls of come All Souls Day. And you'll see a number that will paint it for you in very stark pictures. It just is a simple fact. You can add those who passed away to the number of the 1 coming in and 8 leaving, because it gets worse. I don't know where we're headed, but Lent is a good time to do penance and reparation for the decisions that were made that offend our Lord, that led to this crisis that we are in the church. Space Monkey says, when you look at the same question, when asked the same question, who attend the TLM, the number drops about 1% from memory. Yes. Those who attend the traditional Latin Mass believe in the West. I don't have the numbers for Eastern rites, but when you look at the numbers who attend the traditional Latin Mass, you will find that Catholics, only 1 to 2% of those who attend the traditional liturgy deviate from Catholic morality and their beliefs, who deviate from Catholic morality in policy positions they support. 1 to 2%. There's something there. I'm not the one who gets in your face all the time about the Novus Ordo. I'll leave that to others. But there's something there, and it's worth considering, even if it makes you uncomfortable, because it means somewhere along the line things went off the rails liturgically. All right, folks. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, please. And like, subscribe if you haven't. It does help. And please pray for everybody we talked about today, including those who might be trying to take advantage of the ailing pontiff during this time for their own ambitious reasons. They may need the mercy of God in what might be coming for them for that, because that is incredibly bad. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.